people ask me what grade something. Well, I guess technically I'm a sophomore, but really, I guess,
second degree black belt senior.
it's fucking ridiculous. But with jokes on them, that's scholarly. I see that, but...
Hey, Victor, you want to
Wait, what was your name? Psychology. And what would you want to do next? No, you're talking to me. You're a liar. You're trying to be a lawyer. You're a fucking liar.
I can see that. I can see the line of love there.
You are. You're just a liar. Your family a lawyer?
Dude, Victor, it is
Isn't it?
yeah, I walked in.
You're gonna be like Alan. You have a lease on you.
No, wait,
Is that like? Is that you and me? No, you think I'm pretty sorry. They're good.
I was going to go to the second one, but I was like, no way.
Anyway, hey, what's up? You gonna go to sleep again today? Pen, piece of paper, write down what the old guy said. Where's that guy? Oh, really? There's American PlayStation. Right, American. All over.
Okay, the black ones only break. The yellow one, basically, we want to set up shots. You see how like all the wood I could you want to make the shots so that like take off, or like prevent fall. This is one. You want to destroy like fourth class, like and with the heaviest
I couldn't keep it. My guy in organization said, nutrition. But it looks like just looking at it. Is anybody here taking nutrition? You took it? Was it really like an easy class? Oh, hard? Never mind. What about intro to chemistry? With Dr. Bot? Anybody?
Science major or non-science major?
Non-science.
Should be easy as hell. His test questions are half chemistry. Half of his, like, 3/4 of his questions are actual chemistry questions, and the rest of them are like, what year was UH founded?
Where is a UH founded?
No, he puts like university questions, just random history questions.
Alright, I'll keep chemistry.
How about for me?
Majors? I don't know, it's fucking like impossible, dude. I took Chem 2 with Bob. There were 600 people in there when they started. At the end, there were about 200. Yeah, barely. Well, I'm not a science major anymore.
She took my...
Oh,
I've got sick.
He gave us a minute.
Two more. No, like we have to read two more meditation. Because he's, which one are we doing? Oh, just the fourth meditation? And what are we doing? Oh, that's it? You can answer how does that be long? Yeah, because that's
There's like right here.
Every day in class, I got to work class. Like, yeah, this is long. He's from formula and
It's like, I normally but my car was going down. Haven't you asked me before? He's like, I never did it. I'm like,
Bathroom in here, right? Come on. And drink. All in one. Tequila.
Got my class.
So that was something. We're deciding on
Sleepy, but that's like ring size at
I just go there and I'll pay attention. I'll pay attention. I thought I was. It's too hard. He's asking for what size. You guys know that Jay. Well, I don't know. Yeah,
so she keeps coming on to them. So he lets her.
yeah, and
Ladies and gentlemen, some of you were not here last time, I'm fairly sure. You need paper assignments.
I almost made it in there.
Oh, yes!
So, I mean, but not to like, understand that we shouldn't
It is.
It just sounds like just My brother is like the best friend. That is so funny. Rylan, like he's a good guy. Yeah. He would like make me daddy.
Yeah, but I don't want like,
Like Lloyd? Christopher Lloyd? Back to the Future, right? No. Yeah, that's why I grew my hair. I was hoping somebody would come up with that. Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, whenever you're ready. Yoo-hoo! Time to start. Okay, so let me just remind you of Chisholm's basic idea of what has to be true in order for it to be true that somebody did something of their own free will. Okay, so here you've got this, we'll just call this person S here, okay? And the question is whether or not they did something of their own free will. And what we had over here, I think last time was something like a murder, right? Whether S killed Jones of his own free will. Right? Let me get this out. Chisholm's got two concepts of causation. One is supposed to be the standard kind of causation that we all are familiar with and don't have any problem with. Like when a baseball hits a window, it causes the window to break. Right? But the idea of the determinist is that the universe consists entirely of sequences of events like this. Every event was caused by some previous event, which was caused by some previous event, etc., all the way back, right, as far as you want to go. And so if the determinist's right, that's the true story about every event. It was caused by some previous event in the normal, sort of, well, how to say this? There's just this, what he calls transient causation, event causation, if you like. And the idea is that Chisholm is quite prepared to agree that if every event is caused like that, in particular, if Jones' being killed was caused like that, then it was not done by anybody's free will, right? You can't, if an act or a bit of behavior is caused in this way, then it's not something that somebody did of their own free will. It's just, you can't have the causation and freedom at the same time, not this kind of causation. So what's got to be true, according to Chisholm, is in order for it to be true that this person killed that person, is that this person caused an event to happen. They may very well, in fact almost certainly, don't realize that they caused it to happen, but this event here happened just as a result of this person's being here, right? Somehow they bring about this event. That event then causes other events, and the whole chain leads over here finally to Jones getting killed, okay? But the chain of events that ends with Jones getting killed starts with an event that wasn't caused by any other event. This person somehow brought this about. And the idea is that this is pretty clear that if this is going to have any chance of working, that the event in question is something that goes on in the person's brain, right? Which controls all of the person's behavior. So somehow S brings about, causes, in this very different way, an event, which then causes other events which result in Jones's being killed. I'm going to say something about puzzles about that in a minute. I mean, some comments on it, but a standard objection to this is that it seems pretty hard to say what the difference is supposed to be between S's causing this event and this event just happening. If you picture this brain just sort of ticking away, everything's going on as normal, right? One event causing another, because that's 99.9999% of stuff in the world is determined in this way. So things are going on in this person's brain in the standard way. But then all of a sudden, this event happens in the brain, which was not caused by any other event. And the story is that it was caused by this person somehow, right? Whatever this This is so-called agent causation or imminent causation. Right? This person somehow brought about the occurrence of this event, which then leads to the death of Jones. Somebody who doesn't want to buy this, an opponent of Chisholm says, what the hell is the difference between this thing just happening and Jones's making it happen? Jones is causing it. Imminent causation, agent causation, some sense or other of causation. What's the difference between it just happened and his causing it to happen? In other words, what's the content of the claim? Let's suppose that an event happens in Jones's brain, in S's brain, that was not caused by anything. It just happened. As far as the other events in the universe are concerned, nothing made it happen. It just happened. And you want to say, well, it didn't just happen. This person made it happen. What are you adding to, or what are you saying, besides the fact that it happened and no event caused it to happen? What are you adding to that when you say this person made it happen? Right? And Chisholm recognizes that this is a legitimate question. But his answer is this. His answer is, look, the problem here is not with my theory. The problem is with this. Blank caused ... Sorry. Try to spell this right here. Okay. Here's the problem. It's with the notion of causation, any kind of causation. The concept of causation is just obscure. It's a difficult, in fact, you can find lots and lots of philosophical work written on the concept of causation. It is a pretty interesting concept. But we're not going to go into any of that, or just stick at the surface here. Chisholm wants to say, look, you want to talk about causation, ordinary causation, events causing other events, and I talk about another kind of causation. You object to my way of talking because you think it's obscure, but the obscurity is in the concept of causation, which you use just as much as I do. Right? You can't explain to me what causation is any more than I can just explain to you what my version of causation is. Here's the idea that to say that one event caused another, say that A caused B. It's my chopmanship as much as anything else. Right, to say that event A caused event B is to say at least this much, that well, let's write this as briefly as I can. Every A-type event is followed by a B-type event. And so if you say baseball hitting the window caused the window to break, what you're committed to saying is that given that any time a baseball hits a window with the same kind of amount of force at the same angle, blah, 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 right? The same thickness of the glass, right? You have to build all that in. But any time an event like that one, right, happens, it's going to be followed by an event like that one. A baseball hitting the window in that way is going to be followed by the window breaking. And that's the minimum content of the notion of causation. If you want to commit yourself to the idea that this is what caused this to happen, then you're committed to the idea that anytime something exactly like this happens again, it's going to be followed by exactly something like this again. And what's true about Chisholm's idea of causation is that you can't say anything like that. This event happens in S's brain, and Chisholm wants to say S somehow caused it. But Chisholm does not want to say that if S were in exactly the same situation again, that he would bring about exactly the same event in his brain again. This is a free act. Right? This is a person freely doing something, namely bringing this event about, which leads to his killing Jones. And under the same circumstances, since this person is perfectly free, nothing's causing him, nothing causes us to bring this about. It's just the person sitting there that somehow supposedly causes this event to happen by an act of free will. Right? And since it's an act of free will, this person can freely decide to do, could freely decide to do something else if they were ever in exactly the same situation again. So, you know, there's a real problem here, it seems to me, for Chisholm to say, what the hell this is supposed to be. And Chisholm's just, you know, a libertarian. It's a problem for the libertarians to explain what this is supposed to mean. But one other thing that Chisholm says is that, according to him, this kind of causation, right, imminent causation, I'll write it down here one more time, this kind of causation is actually clearer than transient causation. The claim is that we get our concept of free action, freely bringing things about, from our, just from our own experience. We bring things about all the time, right? We make the coffee boil, or we make the we heat the coffee up by pushing the right button on the microwave, or whatever. Right? We make the we get the floor cleaned by sweeping the floor. Whatever. We bring things about, and it's us making things happen that is the source of our concept of causation. That's where we get it from our own special case, namely imminent causation. I'm going to make you sweat about this a little bit in a way that I will not ask you to address on an exam. But it's worth just trying to think about this. We supposedly get our concept of something actually causing something else by the fact that we cause things to happen all the time, which we just immediately are aware of. We just realize that we just made something happen. We just spilled some milk on the table. We knocked over the glass, whatever. We make things happen all the time. And that's where we get our concept of causation from. Well, just think about what Chisholm is saying here in this way. Right? I'm going to come back to this at the end, actually. We never know, actually, Chisholm doesn't claim we know, whether we've brought about some event in our brain that wasn't caused by any other event. How the hell would we know that, right? We just don't. So what he's asking us to think about is all kinds of familiar cases where we make things happen, clean the floor, spill the milk, whatever. We cause things to happen, which there's no reason to think are examples of this. They're just, I mean, you know, these things are fair enough to say rare. Chisholm would think these are fairly unusual things, right? We don't exercise our free will all the time. We sweep the floor because we feel guilty because whatever. You know, we have all kinds of reasons. Lots of our behavior is caused in a perfectly straightforward way by this kind of causation, right? Including all the things that you're likely to think of as obvious cases where you cause something to happen. So, right, the idea that we get our concept of this special kind of causation by thinking about cases where we cause something to happen, it just doesn't compute, because we don't, the ordinary cases where we realize we caused something to happen, there's no reason to think that there was this kind of weird causation involved, right? Something caused us, as I say, you feel guilty about your roommate or whatever, and it's your job to sweep the floor, so you sweep the floor, right? Something caused you to sweep the floor. Nevertheless, you have this idea of bringing something about, but it's not one of these. I mean, there's no reason to think it is anyway. So this is, I mean, what Chisholm needs to face up to is that this is, in fact, a strange concept of causation. Maybe the whole idea of causation, even in a simple case where the baseball causes the hitting the baseball hitting the window causes the window to break. Simple cases like that. Maybe there's a problem there too. But at least we know something about what's being said there. Namely, that if exactly the same kind of event happens again, exactly the same thing is going to result, right? There's a universal connection between an event, a cause, and its effect. Whereas in this case, that's not true. So we're left kind of trying to figure out what the hell this amounts to. Okay, I'm being harsh on Chisholm, but there it is. Yeah, so, excuse me. I'm going to take pity on you, almost because I have to take pity on you. I'm not going to discuss the last few paragraphs of Mr. Chisholm's essay, where he's talking about certain differences between two kinds of causes. It's a very obscure discussion. And I couldn't make it very clear to you because I don't think it's very clear myself. So we're just going to skip that, okay? I mean, with this is, it's a sidebar anyway. So this is the picture, okay, that Chisholm's got, that has this problematic concept of imminent causation at the center of it. So just some points that are worth noticing. And this is no refutation of Chisholm, but it's just worth noticing. First of all, you remember Chisholm starts out saying we need, when we're thinking about the problem of free will, we're thinking about a concept that's married to our concept of somebody's being responsible for what they did, right? The idea is that people can't be held responsible, they can't legitimately be held responsible for something unless they are the person that in fact brought it about. Right? They have to be the source of the act, and so that's why we need this picture, right? It starts with them. So it's just worth noticing that this idea is totally useless for trying to figure out whether anybody's responsible for what they did. Right? If you want to know whether somebody's responsible for some particular act, the only way to settle that question on this theory is you got to go back. You got to look back into the events that preceded Jones's being killed, and you got to look into this brain, and you've got to see at least if there's an event here that wasn't caused by any other event. Right? Well, nobody can do that. Right? I mean, it's hopeless. That's not a philosophical problem with the theory. It doesn't mean the theory is more obscure. It just means it's useless for the moral purpose that we would like to be able to use it for, namely determining who's responsible and who's not. On this kind of theory, there is no possibility whatever in the real world of determining whether somebody's responsible for something that they did. Because there's no possibility of going back and looking in their brain and see if something happened that wasn't caused by anything ordinary. Let me make that point again. When I say there's nothing, it's not a philosophical objection to this in a way. That is, it's not the point is not that his theory is incoherent. It may be this is the way to go, right? That this is how we need to think about somebody's being responsible. Namely, they brought about some event that wasn't caused by any other event, right? And it led to that, right? Maybe that's the best we can do in trying to come up with a picture of when somebody's actually responsible for something. They started something that brought it about. But if that's true, right, then we just immediately give up all hope of ever telling whether anybody's responsible for anything. Because there's no possibility of looking into people's brains at the time things were starting to happen to see if there's an uncaused event in there. Much less, if it is uncaused, figuring out whether the person brought it about or whether it just was a random event. Okay? All right, so similar, a very closely related point. You and I don't know, even in our own case, whether we are responsible for what we did. The fact that you did it deliberately, the fact that you did it with forethought, the fact that whether you go through all the stuff, whatever you want, right, doesn't make you responsible unless there's some event in your brain that you brought about that wasn't caused by anything else. That's the only way anybody can be responsible. And you have no idea whether you brought about an event in your brain that led to whatever it was you did. So we don't even know in our own case whether we're responsible. We're taught different ways of figuring out whether we're responsible. But on this theory, the only way you can be responsible is if there's an event like this. And neither you nor I has a clue, ever, whether we've brought about an event like that. Third thing to notice is that, and Chisholm's perfectly aware of this, but it's worth stressing, that if S did this of his own free will, then there is no explanation of why he did it. You remember, back to my example of my giving some money to the American Heart Association, and you just described this scenario where it makes perfectly good sense to say, yeah, Johnson did that because, and then you can give a whole list of reasons why I did it, and they would explain why I did it, right? But this event here, nothing explains this event that I bring about here, and nothing causes me to cause this event. The whole process starts in me somehow, right? So there's nothing that causes me to cause that, right? Because then we would just be back to transient causation. The arrow just goes through me, right? And that's not the picture. The picture is that. It starts here. It starts in me. And nothing that's in here causes me to cause this. So if I tell you that the reason I did something or other is because I thought it was the right thing to do, then if my believing that it was the right thing to do caused me to do it, then I'm not responsible. If I'm responsible for whatever it was I did, nothing caused me to do it. I just did it. So there's this weird result that there's no explanation for somebody's doing something which they did actually of their own free will. There can't be, because in order for it to be of their own free will, one more time, the whole process has to start in here, right? And nothing in there or anywhere else can cause this person to bring about this event. It comes out, right? Which is why it makes sense to ask Chisholm the question, what's the difference between saying the thing in your brain just happened and saying that you brought it about, right? Because it's just sitting out there, this weird thing is all isolated by itself. Okay, yeah, never mind. I was gonna toss in a sidebar thing, but I won't. It's the last thing you need is a sidebar. Yes?
Sorry, so the third reason, you said there's no explanation for what exactly?
There's no explanation for my bringing this event about, my causing this event. Right? I just cause it. Okay, that's, I should almost apologize. It's a hard piece of stuff to wrap your mind around, but this is the people who just really bite the bullet with the determinists. They're with the determinists on one issue. You can't be determined and free. Okay? So since they think we're free, they've got to come up with some story about what a free act is that doesn't involve determinism. Something has to happen that's not caused in the usual way. And this is the story. Okay, so we've looked at the two opposite pole folks here, the hard determinists and the libertarians. And having looked at them for a while, it's now worth pointing out something which is fairly weird, maybe very weird, about this whole debate. That these two people, right? The hard determinist says every event is caused by other events, right? The whole future of the world is all laid out. There's no such thing as maybe this will happen, maybe that will happen. Something is already determined to happen. And so there's no free will. And you have the libertarians who say, yeah, pretty much that's the way the world works, but there are exceptions, right? There are things like this, where human beings have this special ability to start something new. Those are free events, so strictly speaking, determinism is not true. It may be true for almost all the universe, but human beings, at least, are exceptions. They sometimes do things of their own free will, though a lot of what they do is in fact determined. But sometimes the exception happens. Now, here's what's weird about this argument, to the extent that you've got people who are insisting on the one hand determinism is true, and on the other hand somebody insisting determinism is not true. Determinism is just the theory that every event in the universe is caused by other events, right? Another event or events. That's the essence of the theory. Now, the focus, of course, since we're talking about free will, turns out to be on events that human beings engage in, like killing people or eating dinner or whatever, right? We are part of the physical world, and so the question is whether or not every single event that involves our body is caused, like everything else in the universe, or not. And so you saw Holbach saying, right, every single thing that a human being does is in fact caused, the same way as everything else in the universe. Of course, Holbach says, human beings aren't pieces of chalk, they're not rocks. If you want to understand what caused some of their behavior, that's a very, very, very complicated story, right? And we may never, I don't know, Holbach doesn't say this, but I suspect, but he ought to be willing to say this, we may never be in a position to give the kind of complete, detailed, precise, causal explanation of human behavior that we can give for a piece of chalk. You can calculate it as precisely as you want to, right? The weight of the chalk, the density of the chalk, the density of the air between where you let it go and the floor, the distance, the interfering forces. You can calculate it all out and tell precisely when and where this chalk is going to hit the floor. The chances that we're ever going to be able to do that with human beings are pretty slim. But the determinists are standing there, right, on their soapbox saying there is an explanation. Right? There is a complete causal explanation for everything that a human being does, just as complete as with a piece of chalk. It's just a lot more complicated. And on the other hand, you've got the libertarians on their own soapbox, and they're saying, no, that's not true. Right? There are some of these things that happen, and if you could actually see what happens, you could look back and see what caused what, trace the causes back for a while, you'd eventually find that it came back to some event in somebody's brain that didn't have an event that caused it. Right? That's what you would find. We claim that there are such events. Right? So, I mean, I don't expect you to find this terribly amusing, but I always do every time I get to this point. You've got philosophers, some of whom know a whole lot of physics, but very few of them. And the ones that are interested in this problem tend not to know much physics, not that it matters much. But you've got philosophers here arguing about the physics of the universe. Right? One of them is saying, is every event in the universe is caused by other events in the universe? And the other one is saying, no, some of them aren't. Right? What the hell do they know about it? Right? They know nothing about. I mean, it's sort of, you know, I don't know how to describe what strikes me as the absurdity of philosophers arguing about whether or not everything a human being does is caused by some other event, or every event in the human body is caused by some other event. One side saying yes, the other side saying no, without either one of them having any hope for the next, let's say, 100,000 years of understanding what goes on inside human beings well enough to be able to predict their behavior the way you can predict the behavior of a piece of chalk. So it's a weird debate. Now, in fairness to the libertarians, like Chisholm anyway, what they're doing is, they're claiming that we're sometimes free, but they're giving a picture, trying to give a picture of how that would make sense. The assumption being that the other picture, we don't have any problem with. It turns out that there are all kinds of interesting questions about that too. But transient causation, we all think we understand. Baseball hits the window breaks, right? That kind of causation is fine. And so that the determinist position is already coherent. But then you get people like Holbach, the hard determinists, for whatever reason, they're intent on trying to convince everybody that that's the full story about the universe, including human beings. Yeah?
So in short, the libertarians, they believe that something can originate from your brain without something causing that thought.
So saying it originates in you isn't quite right. It's close enough. It originates here somehow in you. You exercise your free will, and that brings about an event in your brain that doesn't have any cause. No event caused it.
And that would be classified as imminent causation.
That's called imminent causation. Yep, or agent causation. Right.
Almost wouldn't believe in chance or randomness at all.
Oh, questions about whether these guys believe in chance or randomness. A hard determinist, they don't. Now that quantum theory has arrived, they will mention this by the side, and it's fair enough. But at the macroscopic level, as they say, right above the subatomic level, the idea is that there are no random events. Right, it's a machine, even though subatomically it's not. Yeah.
Could you more detail this with the extreme differences between both coherent systems?
Can I tell you the extreme differences?
Yeah, like in my call or something.
No, that's it right there.
That's it. That's all
Look, the difference between them is very simple. The determinists think every event is caused by another event. The libertarians say, no, that's false. And beyond that, they say that some events in the world are caused by agents, by people, by persons. Right? That's what this is. And so you have this mysterious idea. It looks pretty mysterious anyway to most people, of what this is, right? A person causing an event to happen. But the idea is that you have to have that, the libertarians think, because you need something that starts with the person, right? It has no history. It starts right here, and it leads to the killing. That's why they're responsible, because they're the one that brought about this, which led to the killing. Yeah. Wouldn't he have to exist before he did it? Yeah, he would. I apologize. Your email is still on my desk. I'm on my desktop, and it shows up now as having been read, and I meant to get back to it and respond. What you have to say is, yes, the person has to have existed before, right? This person's been around for a while. But your question is whether or not that doesn't mean that somehow this thing does have an event, a cause, some event caused it. Is that right? Why would you think that? Sorry?
He has to exist before he can have that thought, right?
Right.
And his existence has a cause.
His existence has a cause, yes.
So doesn't that change so bad forever?
His existence has a cause, but this event doesn't. Right? I mean, this is something he does of his own free will. I mean, he might or might not have done it. He does it. And nothing that caused him to exist causes that to happen. Nothing in him, none of his beliefs, nothing about him causes that to happen. Right? It's him rather than any properties of him or any past events or whatever? It's a very good question, but that's the idea. I mean, that's the best you can do by way of defending it, is say, no, sure, the human being has to have, there's an explanation for that human being and about everything about it, except for these free decisions that the person makes. There is no explanation of those. They just come somehow from this being. So all those other things had to have existed all the way through this person's life and even all the way back in order for him to be around, in order to bring this about. But none of that history explains why the event happened. Okay? Okay. So we are going to talk about the third party to this group. And the third view, I should tell you that something like 97% of contemporary philosophers buy this third view. These are the people, they've got two names. They're soft determinists. And they're also called compatibilists. They're called soft determinists. I'm not going to use that term much. We probably ought to drop it by now, because the reason they're called this is because at least the early members of this tribe were in fact determinists. They agree with the first premise of the hard determinist argument. Determinism is true. Every event is caused by other events. So they're against the libertarians. They're over there with the determinists on the subject of determinism. However, they think that we're free anyway. We're both determined and free. You'd have to read. Let me just remind you. The first three lines in that handout are that you've got determinism is true. If determinism is true, then no freedom. So no freedom, right? There are no free acts. And the two folks we've looked at so far have agreed about this. If determinism is true, then there's no freedom. You can't have it both ways. So you've got the hard determinists who think that determinism is true, so we're not free. You've got the libertarians who think this is true, we are free, so determinism's false. Right? You got to go one way or the other. You can't have them both. And these folks, the early, and for a long time, most of these soft determinists, so-called soft determinists, are determinists. They think determinism's true, but they think we're also free. Right? So they reject this idea that if determinism is true, then you don't have any freedom. Right? The idea is you can have both. But the essence of these people's view, the real focus of attention here, is the idea that the two are compatible. Determinism and freedom are compatible. So you could believe that even if you weren't the determinist. Whatever else you thought, you might think that the two are, you can have both. And that's why this is a term I'm standardly going to use. You can see why they were called soft determinists in the first place. Right? A hard determinist is somebody who just says determinism is true, so we don't have any damn freedom. Right? and the soft determinist says, well, determinism is true, but we're free anyway. Right? Kind of a happier way of looking at things. But the main thrust of their position is that whichever, whether or not determinism is true, or whether or not we're free, you could have both. There's no incompatibility between these two views, okay, of our being free and being determined. So I'm going to stick reasonably close to what the essay you've got here. Just follow air and get to I'm going to get to the meat of it pretty quickly. he starts out with, in a kind of a nice way, by discussing just the general question whether there may be some limits to how much we're ever going to be able to explain of what goes on in the universe, in part because it may turn out, as it has turned out, of course, with quantum theory. You know, let me strike that. Forget about quantum theory. There may be a limit to the extent to which nature is in fact governed by causal laws. Right? Maybe not everything is in fact governed by causal laws. That possibility, Ayer suggests, looks like it's open. Right? We learn more and more and more about the universe, but there's no guarantee that we can penetrate the universe all the way through and see that everything is in fact governed by natural laws. And so determinism is true in this sort of nice, clean, neat way, that every event is caused by other events. Maybe that's not true. So it's just a nice way to sort of get the subject off the ground, because what he wants to come to is the idea that the people who believe in free will have got, some of them, the libertarians, namely that there is some limit to how much we're going to ever be able to explain about the universe, because human beings have got free will, and that means that some of what they do is not caused by other events. And so he gets launched into this series of back and forths with people who want to take this line, like Chisholm. And it's important to realize that when in trying to just, well, you probably didn't have any problem with this. You're reading through Ayer, he's just giving you a straight exposition of and defense of the compatibilist view, but from a non-libertarian, non-Chisholm sort of perspective. For Ayer, there are two possibilities. Either determinism's true, or some events are just random. Determinism says that every event has a cause. Right? If determinism's false, then what Ayer is picturing is, if determinism's false, that just means there are some random events, right? Uncaused events. Of course, the libertarians disagree. Right? Just because determinism is true doesn't mean they're just random events, because there's imminent agent causation. Human beings cause things to come about in this peculiar way, right? But that's not present in Ayer's discussion at all. So you got a choice between determinism and some randomness in the universe. And one of the things that Ayer wants to make clear at the beginning is that the idea of finding room in the universe for free will by thinking that some events don't have causes, it's not going to cut it. Okay, so let me read you a sentence here, a couple of them. If it's a matter of pure chance that a man should act in one way rather than another, he may be free, but he can hardly be responsible. Maybe you want to call this person free because some of their behavior just doesn't have any explanation, right? But that's not enough to make them free. And indeed, when a man's actions seem to us quite unpredictable, when, as we say, there's no knowing what he will do, we do not look upon him as a moral agent, we look upon him as a lunatic. Well, that's not the best way, I think, to make the point. I already made the point in the best way to make it, I think, when I described this hypothetical scenario with you and me walking down the breezeway after class and my arm just flying out and hitting you in the nose. Right? And I asked you to be clear about what I'm supposing here, namely that is a completely uncaused event. Right? That's what you're supposed to imagine here. Right? And that's what Ayer is trying to get at here. If this happened, right, and my arm just shot out, nothing caused it, not me or anything else caused it. It was a random, uncaused event. Mystery in the universe. That's not something you would want to say is an obvious example of my doing something of my own free will. It's something that happened to my arm. It happened to me. It happened to you. But it just happened. I mean, it didn't. Nothing caused it, including me. So just going for indeterminism, right, isn't enough to get you the idea that you've got freedom in the world, right? Random uncaused events are not free acts. They're random uncaused events. They're just these weird things that have no explanation. Then he goes through a series of exchanges here. Well, I don't think I'm going to take you through all of them, but the first one, I'll tell you two of them. The first one is he says, look, the person who believes in free will, the person he's arguing with, says, look, I'm not talking about a random event when I'm talking about somebody doing something of their own free will. I'm talking about their choosing to do this. Right? They chose to do this rather than that. They chose to go have a cup of coffee rather than to go to the movies or whatever. They're making a free choice. Well, Ayer's response to that is this. How did I come to make that choice? What caused me to make that choice? You can say I made a choice, okay, but something caused me to make that choice. Maybe the fact that suddenly the thought of coffee popped into my head, and that made me decide to go get myself a cup of coffee. And he says, look, you got two choices. Either this choice was caused by something or other, in which case you've got a deterministic picture, or it wasn't caused by anything, in which case it's random, it just happened, and you still don't have a free act. And this happens 2 or 3 times here, right? The idea is you try to pick on something special about this free act that this person did, what led them to do it or whatever. And Ayer wants to say, well, let's look at what led them to do it. Either something caused them to do it, in which case you're back to determinism again, or nothing caused them to do it, and it's just a random event, came out of nowhere. And that's not an act of free will. So what the hell are you talking about? So the one that he eventually winds up with, and that turns out to be really significant, is the idea that if you do something of your own free will, something you're responsible for, then it's something which is somehow an expression of your character. Right? It's something that you would do. So go back to my heart association example again, right? As I described that case, what I suggested was it looks like you could perfectly well explain my behavior by saying what my motivations were, what my financial condition was, what my beliefs were about the heart association, blah, 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 blah. Right? There's a whole lot of stuff in my head and about my financial condition or whatever that explains, right, why I did it. And this is exactly the moral that Ayer wants to draw from this notion of something coming out of your character. Right? The idea is that if you think again about an example of your own, where some friend of yours or you or whoever, you say, yeah, there's a case of what I'd say they did that of their own free will. They're responsible, right? Good or bad. If you think about at least lots of cases like that, what you're going to realize is that there are cases where you would have said, yeah, I could have told you they'd do that. Right? That's who they are. That's the kind of thing that this person would do. It's not unexpected. So the idea that the cases we think of where it's about as clear as cases we can come up with for our own, to our own satisfaction, of something we'd call a case of somebody doing something of their own free will, it's going to be a case where it's not all that surprising that they did it. It sort of is who they are. It's an expression of what they're like. So then, of course, Ayer wants to ask, well, how'd they get the character they've got? Right? And you go into this idea of, and I'm going to stay here for about 30 seconds. You go into the idea that sort of we acquire the characters that we have over time. We actually create our own characters. We do this, we gradually over time we become a certain kind of person as a result of our whole biography. And what Chisholm wants, what Eyre wants to ask at every step is, well, when you did this, did something cause you to do that? When you made this step toward having the character you have, did something cause you to do that? And then you just determine. There's nothing free about that. And if there's a whole lot of those steps, then your whole character is determined, and so something comes out of your character, the whole story is determined, right? So you don't have any free will in here. So somewhere in this whole story about how you got your character, you're going to have to bring in something else. Well, the only other thing you can bring in is some random things happened. Right? They just came out of nowhere. Right? And that means you still don't have any, you don't have, excuse me, a character that results as a result of a free choice. Right? It's a result, in that case, of a series of random events and their consequences. Right? So it's either determined or it's random. Either way, you're not going to get a free will out of this until you get rid of the idea that determinism and freedom that you're looking at the wrong contrast. Right? When you've got built into your head the idea that determinism and freedom are just opposites, you're actually you're not thinking something exactly crazy. Well, not even close to crazy, but you've missed the mark, is what Eyre wants to say. The worry, the basic worry in this whole conflict among these three groups is the idea, obviously from that handout, the hard determinist stuff, which expresses the whole problem very well. If determinism is true, then here's one way to put it. It's not Eyre's language, but it's the point he's getting at. Then whatever happens had to happen. Like I'm going to, you'll be glad to be done with this topic because I'll stop talking about this piece of chalk or some piece of chalk. But right, if I let this piece of chalk go, it has to fall. There's some sense in which it has to fall. It's not, there's only one possibility about what can happen given the circumstances. And the idea, the reason that determinism is such a threat to the idea that we have some kind of control over our lives, some choice, some freedom about what to do, is that if our behavior is governed by natural laws, just as much as the behavior of chalk is, then it looks like whatever we do, we had to do. It's just an illusion that we could have done something else. I think I could have gone to the movie instead of just staying home and having a cup of coffee. Nope. It was built into the universe from way back that at this particular point I was going to have a cup of coffee. Right? And I was going to have all these thoughts about, gee, what should I do? Have a cup of coffee or go to the movies? I think I'll stay here and have a cup of coffee. And the whole scenario is built into the history of the universe, and I'm just sort of living through it. Sort of. Right? It's a nasty, nasty picture. And so what Eyre wants to say is, look, this is a mistake to think that, about this contrast between freedom and causality. The contrast, what contrasts with freedom isn't causality at all. But over here you've got stuff we all want, which is freedom. And what it contrasts with, Eyre breaks into two categories. Which are compulsion and constraint. This is stuff, the idea is that there are things in the world that interfere with or prevent you, interfere with your freedom, prevent you from exercising your freedom. And that's what you ought to be looking at. Freedom can be exercised, but it can also be frustrating. And the idea that what this ought to be contrasted with is determinism or causation, which is what the worry has been forever and a day, is a mistake, right? That's not the contrast with freedom. The contrast is with one or another kind of interference with your capacity to exercise your free will. So, what's the idea here? Pretty simple, actually. The kinds of cases that Ayer wants to call compulsion, cases where you are compelled to act the way you do, are typified. He just gives he gives two things he calls compulsion, but the first one is the most vivid one, an external compulsion. That's when I hold a gun to your head and I compel you to hand over your money. I'm compelling you to do something. Ayer points out that if I point a gun at your head and threaten to kill you if you don't give me your money, you've still got the option to say, screw you, right? Fire away, right? You got free will. I mean, you can say, nope, no deal. But it's, so, right, you're not literally forced to do this, to hand over your money. But, as Ayer says, it's fair enough to say that your behavior was compelled. This person, I made you hand over the money by threatening you with death, right? So that's one kind of thing that interferes with freedom, right? A free person is somebody who's not at the point of a gun and being told what to do that they don't want to do on pain of being executed on the spot, right? This is one way that a person can fail to be free, is by being compelled. I'm just looking for his. Yeah. Then this is the compulsion. It's a nice distinction. It's not terribly important. The point is they both interfere with your freedom. On the other side, you get on the other hand, you get what he calls constraints. And the first example he gives of this is of somebody. This is nice language. You know what you made of this? A case in which another person has obtained an habitual ascendancy over me. What he's got in mind there is that this is somebody who's just basically turned your mind somehow or other into an extension of themselves. They've got total control over you. They can make you do whatever they want without putting a gun to your head, right? They've got psychological control over you. So and this he wants to call a constraint of some kind. You can see the difference between compulsion and constraint doesn't amount to much here, but there's a kind of difference between the actual physical threat of some kind and just this kind of mind control. So that's one of the examples he gives, and what he wants to say about that example, and also about a different kind of example, which is an internal defect. Specifically, he talks about kleptomania, right? Somebody who's suffering from kleptomania may in fact feel guilty as hell about their thievery. They may want to stop their thievery. They may try to prevent themselves from stopping, from stealing. But the fact is, all this stuff that's going on in their head is not going to have any effect. They're going to steal it anyway, right? That's what it is to be a kleptomaniac, is not to be able to control this kind of behavior no matter how hard you try. And so you can have this stuff that's just internal to you, or you can have somebody else who's managed to get this kind of psychological control over you. You too may think hard about, you want to be able to do certain things, may resist doing what you know they're trying to get you to do, but in the end it's not going to matter. all you're thinking hard about, not wanting to do this, trying to stop yourself, it doesn't play any role in what you actually do. Right? You can go through the same kind of process that folks without that kind of problem go through all the time. Now, people are always fighting with themselves about whether to indulge themselves in this or whether they're going to abstain or whatever. It's a normal process. And very often, that thought process has something to do with what you wind up doing. Sometimes you can talk yourself into it, sometimes you can't. But in these cases, where somebody's got this kind of control over you, or you suffer from kleptomania, that whole thought process, the arguing with yourself, the trying to get yourself to do the right thing, it's a sideshow. It doesn't play any role in what you're going to do. If you got kleptomania, you're going to steal it. Right? And if this person's got this kind of total control over you, you're going to do what they want you to do, no matter how hard you think about this. So this is the kind of thing that Ayer thinks we ought to be thinking about. The kind of thing that is in fact a threat to freedom, right? Either an external, with a gun or without a gun, through the mind control, or internal, like kleptomania. You can have various circumstances and conditions that interfere with your ability to exercise your free will. So that's the thing to think about when you're trying to get clear about what free will is. Being free basically means that your behavior is not being affected, prevented, controlled by some kind of compulsion or constraint, internal or external. Okay? I'm going to argue with that in the end, right? I think Ayer is wrong to think that determinism is not a threat, but that is a mouthful to wrap our minds around. That's a nice mixed metaphor. Wrap your mind around a mouthful of something. But let me just say, I'm going to let you out of here a few minutes early. Let me just say what the basic idea here is, and that takes a lot of explaining, and then I'm going to criticize the hell out of it. The basic idea is that for the compatibilists, that I'm acting of my own free will as long as I'm doing what I want to do. And if I had wanted to do something else, I would have. Right? It's up to me. Right? The reason I'm doing what I'm doing, the reason I'm having the cup of coffee that I decided to have is because that's what I wanted to do. I felt like having a cup of coffee, and that's what I'm doing. So I'm acting of my own free will. No compulsion, constraint, nobody's interfering with me, whatever, it's just up to me. And it's also true, right, and this is crucial, that I could have done something else. And this is part of their picture, right? It has to be true that I could have done something else. And as I described the case, right, I could have gone to see a movie. I mean, obviously I could have done 100 different things. But the idea is, it was up to me. I could have gone to a movie, I could have had a cup of coffee. I decided to just stay and have a cup of coffee. But if I had decided to go see a movie, I would have. Right? That's it. That's what freedom amounts to. I'm doing what I want, and if I had wanted to do something else, I would have done something else. Nobody's interfering with me. There are no constraints, da-da-da-da-da-da. And it seems to me that is, that's a pretty seductive picture. I mean, what more is there to acting of your own free will? It's not some weird concept that philosophers dreamed up. I mean, human beings have always had this. It's why they have held each other responsible for doing various things from the get-go. Because they think you didn't have to do that. You could have done something else. So it's an appealing picture. But in the end, it's, in my judgment, a complete flop. And we'll spend a lot of time talking about that next time. We may, however, get to the Euthyphro. So if you haven't gotten to the Euthyphro yet, get to the Euthyphro. Don't pass up the only Plato you may ever be asked to read in your life, or that you ever get asked to read. It occurs to you to read in your life. It's a great dialogue. Professor.